In this episode, we're going to be taking you through some of the best suspension upgrades for the G87 M2. We've currently got the hype motorsport BMW G87 M2 in the workshop for some suspension upgrades. We've been tasked with getting some suspension parts on this car to get much better on-track handling for their customers, but whilst keeping it to a Club Sport spec level. We're currently in the middle of building this car, so we've got some components fitted and some components still to fit, but we're going to talk you through all of them to show what we're adding to this chassis to get the best out of it and to unlock even more grip, even more feel, and make it a much better track car without taking it too far over towards being more like a racing car. One of the biggest problems with the G87 M2 and the G8X M cars in general is understeer. So at the limit, they will heavily push the nose, mid-corner, corner entry, and on track this really shows itself. So the limit is you can't really trust the nose because when you're going a bit too fast, it will just scrub on and it just removes all confidence from the chassis. So to fix that, you need to add more camber to the front axle because there's not enough as standard. And with the G8X M cars and the F8X M cars, it's not adjustable as standard. So you can get an aftermarket camber plate, such as this one is one of ours, that allows you to adjust the camber from the top of the strut. So our camber plate here fits to the top of the OEM strut and to the top of other coilovers that work with the OEM strut, and they introduce the camber adjustment into the chassis so you can get more camber and reduce your understeer. Some key features about these, we have anti-slip grooves designed into ours, so once they're set, they can't actually slip. So when you're running curbs on track or hitting potholes on the road, the setting won't slip, so you know it's got a fixed setting at all times. We also use a very large, substantial rotor ball bearing, and we spent a long time getting these bearings perfect in these camber plates and our F8X camber plates to ensure that they are perfect for road use without increasing any noise, and they're also perfect for track use, allowing all of those shock forces to go directly through the damper and into the chassis to make sure they're responding as fast as possible out on track to make sure they're working at their most optimum. We also do a lot of close work with the British GT cars, with the Century Motorsport British GT4 cars. And in that, we've learned a lot about the caster settings used in that chassis to really make the car get switched on and generate a lot more grip up front. With that knowledge, we've introduced a fixed offset of caster into our top mounts, which currently isn't available on any of the other products on the market. And that increase in caster gives something called dynamic camber gain. So dynamic camber gain is really cool because what that means is as you're turning the steering wheel, the outside wheel, the one that the car is going to get loaded onto, actually increases its camber setting as the wheel gets turned. So as you're going through the corner, the camber gets increased to give even more tyre to lean onto, which means that in a straight line, you can run a little bit less camber than you would otherwise need to, so you can get even more braking stability. So you've got better braking stability, better high-speed traction and motorway traction, for example. But then as you're coming into the corner, you get all that grip from the camber gain as you're turning that steering wheel. So a really cool feature and a nice blend of geometry all in one top mount that you can literally bolt to your OEM shock or to a coilover unit and gain all of those benefits out of the chassis. Now that we've addressed the adjustable camber, we've got the camber plate installed in the chassis, the next step is to look at the coilover options or something similar. So we have spec'd the AST HAS kit, which stands for Height Adjustable Spring Kit, which means that we can maintain the OEM damper and the electronic damping system and all the functionality inside the car, so all the buttons will still work. But what it does mean is that we can now have a stiffer spring installed on the car and some height adjustment introduced. So we can tune the ride height of the car, and we can corner weight it, and we can set the rake angle. So a few benefits you'd get in a coilover, we've got in this kit, but this is a much more cost-effective route of achieving those benefits. So we're not replacing the actual damper unit itself in this case, we're just looking at the spring and height tunability options, which is a really nice part of the upgrade. One of the biggest pieces of feedback we've had from G87 owners and G80 and G82 owners is a lack of steering feel. So they've been describing the car as feeling quite numb through the steering wheel and not having a lot of feedback through the chassis when they're turning the wheel, knowing where that car is being placed. To get around this and to solve this, we have designed our solid front caster bush. So this bush replaces this big OEM rubber bush in here and presses in and makes it a solid bush with an offset caster position in the bearing. This does two things. One, it gets rid of the big rubber bush. So under the brakes, this rubber bush is flexing around and it's moving. This also gets flexed about and moved when the wheel's been turned, so it adjusts the toe setting slightly. And under really heavy braking, especially on track, you can really feel the front moving around, and that is this bush flexing, which isn't a nice feeling inside the car. So with the solid bush installed, you get rid of that. So under braking, the wheel stays exactly where it is, and you get really nice, stable traction from the tyre because the tyre is not being moved around on the track as the brakes are being applied really heavily. The offset caster position, like we were talking about with the top mounts, gives more caster again into the chassis. And this introduces, as we were saying before, the dynamic camber gain. So that also gives steering feel. So dynamic camber gain aside, the other thing it does is increase something called mechanical trail. So this is getting into it a little bit, but mechanical trail is effectively a piece of geometry that gives stiffness to the steering wheel. And that's what the caster increase achieves. So it basically means it feels harder to turn the steering wheel, which in turn provides more feedback through the wheel. So you know exactly where that car is being placed, and you get a bit more feeling and input as you're turning that wheel through the corner. So that's why caster is such a favorable upgrade, especially on the BMW and the Porsche chassis as well. The caster is a really nice thing to get introduced into that car. So our bush replaces the big OEM rubber bush, direct replacement, bolts into the car. And another main benefit of, again, the rotor ball that we have chosen to use in this bearing is that on the road, it doesn't increase noise or harshness, so you barely know it's there, but you get all those added benefits. Moving to the rear of the car, we're addressing some of the key issues that develop when you use this car heavily out on track. So similar to the front, we've got the Haas kit again up at the rear, so we can tune the ride height, rake angle, and corner balance the car. It's also a stiffer spring than standard, so we're getting that stiffer chassis, so lower center of gravity, stiffer chassis, gives us a lot better performance out on track, a lot nicer handling, less chassis wallow, especially with these cars being as heavy as they are now. Next up, we've got our rear tow arm at the back. So this addresses a key issue at the rear of these cars where there's a point in camber and tow adjustment as standard where you can't get the optimum settings of both. So each camber arm and tow arm has its own adjuster, an eccentric bolt, and that allows you to adjust camber and tow independently of one another. However, when you hit the camber setting that you want to use out on track, you can no longer get the tow in anymore because the adjuster is outside of its range. So to get around this, you can fit an adjustable rear tow arm, such as our one that's been fitted to this car. And this gives you full adjustment back into the chassis, so you can run optimum camber settings to get the most out of the tyre through the corner and get the most amount of traction out of the rear end, whilst maintaining the correct tow setting to keep stability and to keep grip at the rear axle. The next step at the rear is we're going to be replacing the standard traction arm with one of our Suspension Secrets rear adjustable traction arms. There again are other options on the market for this, but what that traction arm allows you to do is set it at a different length than OEM, slightly longer by an exact amount, and this gives more traction at the rear axle. How this works is you're effectively changing the kinematics of the back axle using this traction arm. So as the rear goes into squat, as the car goes on throttle, the longer arm allows the hub to rotate forward very slightly, digging the front edge of the tyre mechanically into the ground. So this means on corner exit, as you're getting back on the throttle, the tyre is literally being pushed on the leading edge into the ground to give all that mechanical traction back into the chassis and get you out the corner without oversteering on the throttle. So a really nice upgrade at the back of these cars to keep the back end pinned, super stable, and give lots more acceleration, helping you get all that torque down from the turbo engine off down the straight. So inside the car, not suspension related, but some further upgrades to make this car tuned for the track even better. So this car has come straight to us from A-Reeve Performance, one of our traders and partners who has done the interior conversion on this car ahead of it coming here for the suspension work. So inside, we've got a rear half cage, seat delete kit, just to make it a bit neater in the back once that's fitted. And we've got the Recaro fixed back bucket seats as well. These are also on sliders, so they can be adjusted for the different length of drivers that will be hiring this car out to go around track. So the different height of the driver can be tuned by the slider, meaning that you don't have to take away all the comforts of having bucket seats fitted. With these and the TRS harnesses fitted in here, you've got a more stable driving position. So as you're going around track, you don't have to hold yourself in the seat. You are hugged in by the seat. The harnesses are keeping you strapped in nice and safe, and on the brakes, keeping you pinned into your seat. So you're not using your energy to push yourself back on a steering wheel under the braking and to sort of dig your elbow into the center console to keep yourself upright through the corners. That's all taken care of by the seats and harnesses. And you've got the added safety of the harnesses and of the half cage as well, just in case it goes pear-shaped out on track. So there you have it, some of the top upgrades you can make to the G87 M2 to get the car ready to go on track. Of course, you can go even further than this in the shape of a full coilover unit rather than just the Haas kit to get even more out of the chassis, but there is a lot more cost involved with that. Further from that, you can also get the rear camber arms fitted, and you can get the rear solid subframe bushes fitted to get even more performance out of the chassis. But by doing that, you are increasing the harshness back into the chassis, making it less friendly on the road, and it is also a more costly route to take. If you like any of the upgrades we've shown you in this video, then head over to our shop linked in the description, where you can take a look at some of the upgrades we've mentioned for your car.